Good morning and welcome to Morning Brew on Politics Social. I'm Graham Hughes. It is Wednesday, the 18th of September 2024. We're racing. We're on the final stretch of the end of the year. Oh my God, that came out quick. Comes out quicker every year. Just a big shout out to everyone in the chat there. We've got Billy Kershaw. By gum, is this an early notification? What happened to Geoscope last night? There was a notification last night on the, that you can put messages now on YouTube. There was a notification saying we couldn't do Geoscope last night due to unforeseen circumstances, but we will be doing a very exciting episode of the intersection later today, which you should all look out for. Andrew Ray's in the chat. Yurosh is in there as well. We've got Simon Smith. We've got Sarah, we've got Regan Elite, we've got Gallifrey and Ren, always good to see you. We've got Roger in there, like I said. We've got Peter, Captain, Simon, Russell. Hello, everyone. We've got MH Kara. How you all doing, everyone? If you'd like to join the chat, simply subscribe to the channel. That's all you need to do. Just hit that subscribe button at the bottom of the screen, of the might be your screen, might be whatever you're looking at, just under here, usually, and wait for about 30 seconds and you'll be able to join the chat. So we're going to be talking about Israel today. And again, this is a sensitive topic, so can everyone be respectful in the comments? I don't want things kicking off there. We're going to talk a little bit about whether what's happened, and I'll just explain, like, for those who might not have caught up on this absolutely mad story that broke yesterday. So it looks like Hezbollah, which is the armed militant group in southern Lebanon, but actually it's all over Lebanon, but it's actually active in southern Lebanon, near the border with Israel, and has been for many years. Hezbollah, which is funded by Iran, it's not funded by the Lebanese government. The Lebanese government tend to they don't like Hezbollah by and large. It's the Iranian influence in there, and they are, like a lot of militant groups in the area, like Hamas, they are in constant war with Israel because they don't think that Israel has a right to exist. And meanwhile, Israel thinks it has a right to just go into other people's lands and occupy them, annex them, and settle them. Both of whom are wrong, as far as I'm concerned. Both groups are wrong. However, what happened yesterday was that thousands of these pages that Hezbollah were using, people haven't used pages in this country for about 25 freaking years now, but maybe in hospitals. But these pages were obviously intercepted on their way from Hungary, or maybe Taiwan, or wherever they came from. Or maybe they just managed to get hold of literally thousands of them. This isn't a small scale operation. This isn't like they've got one box of these pages. This is like thousands of pages. And they've opened them up and they've added a small amount of explosives and some kind of digital signal that says, when we send this particular message, we want you to blow up. Usually not enough to kill someone, but enough to maim them for life. But 8 people have died. I don't know, maybe 11 people have died, actually. And one of them was an 8-year-old child. Okay, now here's the thing. This is an audacious attack against Hezbollah. Apparently it wasn't supposed to happen now. It was moved up on the agenda because Hezbollah got wind that these pages had been compromised. But is it going to achieve the aim? You see, this is the thing. In Israel at the moment, you have this conflation of what is important for Israel. And you got the same thing going on in the States as well, actually, with Trump. But essentially, Netanyahu is a rotten, corrupt bastard. Benjamin Netanyahu is the Prime Minister of Israel. And he wants forever war because it keeps him out of jail. As soon as he isn't the Prime Minister anymore, that guy's going to jail for corruption. And he knows it. Everybody knows it. So he is going to do everything in his power to ensure that he stays in power forever. Up to and including helping out Hamas, giving Hamas money in bags, which we know that happened, and relaxing the security so much that hundreds of Hamas terrorists came across the border last October and murdered in excess of 1,000 Israeli citizens, Israeli civilians, and kidnapped hundreds. And Netanyahu went, great, this gives me an opportunity to do two things. One, kill Palestinians, and two, or let's just say, well, I say Palestinians, but they also have just killed a bunch of people who are not Palestinians. They're Lebanese, but they're Muslim. Make of that what you will. He's gone, oh great, I can just keep attacking these people. I can keep killing them with basic impunity, because what are these countries going to do? America isn't going to stop supplying us with weapons anytime soon, because America's economy heavily relies on gun manufacture. The industrial military complex is very important in the economy of America, and they're not going to have themselves a recession in order to save the people of Gaza. That's horrible, and that shouldn't be the equation, but it is. And then you got the second reason, which is to keep Netanyahu out of jail. So he's got two reasons to keep this war going forever and opening a new front on this war. So it's not just in Gaza, it's also in southern Lebanon and on the north border of Israel. Great for him, great. But here's the thing, right? This shouldn't be about one man trying to get out of jail, or even one man who just hates Muslim people. This needs to be about Israel and the idea of Israel. And the idea of Israel, the reason why people came up with it years ago, I mean, it was 30 years before it actually existed, 4 years before it actually existed, that the Balfour Declaration said Israel, the Jewish people should have their own homeland. The reason being is that Jews didn't feel safe anywhere in the world. And that ratcheted up, obviously, with the events of the Second World War and the Holocaust. They didn't feel safe. They didn't feel like they were part of any country, any given community, in their own community, they felt cut off from and dealt with suspicion and violence, often antisemitism, obviously, and they didn't feel safe. So the idea was, we'll have this area that Jewish people can go to. It could be in Uganda. That was one of the possibilities. It could have been Australia. That was one of the possibilities. But they wanted to be in the Holy Land. They wanted to be in their ancestral home from which the Jewish people had come 2,000 years earlier. Unfortunately for them, people already lived there. And instead of working together for a peaceful solution to this situation, Israel was born out of a war. And don't forget, British police officers and British soldiers were killed in the foundation of Israel because it was a British mandate at the time. But then the idea, the basic conceit was to have a homeland where Jews could feel safe. Has that happened? No. So on that metric, I would say that Israel as a country has been a failure. Not necessarily economically, certainly not militarily. I mean, it won the Yom Kippur War, it won the Six-Day War, and it's obviously winning against I was going to say winning against Hamas, but no, it's winning against Gaza. It's the people of Gaza who are suffering. And this makes me think that, like, when they do an operation like this, yes, it's audacious. Yes, it's like, my God, they managed to pull this off. That's quite impressive in a sick, macabre kind of way. It is impressive. But at the same time, like, is this going to make your average Jewish person living in Israel more safe? And I will say no, because you're not dealing with a foreign army. All right, when you've got a foreign army and you're on a battlefield and it's the olden days and you're all dressed in bright colours for some reason and you're all shooting each other, right? You shoot more of them than they shoot of you, right? Generally speaking, you win. That's how you win on a battle like that. But this isn't a battle like that. This is insurgency and terrorism on both sides, I would argue. And the thing is, the more you terrorize people, the more you create terrorists. It wasn't the British, fist closing around the people of Northern Ireland that achieved the peace process. It wasn't by killing innocent civilians every other day in Northern Ireland that achieved the peace process. It was sitting down to talk and have negotiations between the IRA and other paramilitary operators and Sinn Féin, and also the British government. They were secret talks at the time, but that's how they resolved it in the end. Because if you have terrorists and you want to try and take them out, every single one of them that you take out in a way that they've done with this pager incident is just going to create more terrorists. Like, you think that the brother of the little kid who died yesterday, the 8-year-old kid, you think that brother's not going to grow up to be, like, go into terrorism? Like, come on. I mean, you probably would. I probably would, given that I would feel aggrieved towards the Israeli state forever if they did that to my brother, especially if it was a little kid, impressionable. And I'm told all my life that Israel is the baddie, is the bad guys. And so is this going to achieve the goal of peace for the Jewish people? I mean, I want peace for everyone in the Middle East, but specifically, the point of Israel is for people there to be able to live in a peaceful country that, they can feel safe in. Obviously, you have crime everywhere, but, I mean, they don't worry about getting blown up, shot, or kidnapped when they go to buy their groceries, when they go to the supermarket, when they drop their kids off at school. And I mean, that's the first duty of any government, not just particularly Israel, but Israel's got the more interesting history behind it, because not every state, there are not many states set up in the world as a homeland for a group of people who are historically oppressed. It doesn't normally work that way. I mean, if you think about a lot of other countries that have had problems with religion, let's say, it's usually not gone that way. It's usually there's been people living there, some conquerors have come over, said, hey, you have to adopt the new religion or we'll do horrible things to you. So they go, okay, yes, I will adopt your new religion. And that's how it's spread in that area. And the people who keep the old religion are generally oppressed. But that's not the same as those oppressed people then leaving that country and setting up a new homeland. I'm trying to think of incidences where that's kind of happened, and in modern history it hasn't. You might be able to tell me in the chat, give some examples, but I'm trying to think off the top of my head. It's not really happened. I mean, the closest I can think of is the partition of India, which resulted in the death of 1 million people. 1 million people killed in the space of just a few months as a result of Hindus moving from what was then East and West Pakistan into India, and from people who are Muslim moving from India, moving from Rajasthan over into Pakistan, or from Northeast India into Bangladesh. But I mean, the idea that Pakistan was set up for somewhere to be safe if you were Muslim, I think that's a bit of a stretch. I think it's more likely that they wanted a Muslim state, but it wasn't like, oh, well, you can't live anywhere else and feel safe, so come here and then you'll feel safe. And you know what? You could probably argue that it didn't work in Pakistan either. It's almost like you shouldn't divide humans up by the person that they worship in the sky. You're fighting over who's got the best invisible friend. Sorry for any religious people watching this who are probably upset by saying that, but that's the way I feel. So let's jump into the chat and see what you have to say about this incident yesterday and whether you think it's actually going to help matters. I don't think it is, but I'm open for persuasion. If you think that it's going to make the people who are part of Hezbollah more paranoid, so they don't get anything done because they don't want to have a phone, they don't want to use communication because they know that's been hacked by Mossad, by the Israeli forces, intelligence agency, etc. We've got Optimistic Nihilist, who's been a member for 9 months. Well done, mate. This war is about money, power, and extreme ideology. You're right, but it's also about keeping Bibi out of jail. It's about keeping Benjamin Netanyahu out of jail, which, by any metric is not a reason for a war. Also, it's a reason for not voting for. It's not a reason for voting for Trump. The only reason why he's standing for president is because he doesn't want to go to jail. I think that if these charges hadn't been brought to him, he probably would have just been playing golf now forever, and no one would be trying to shoot him, because why would you try and shoot someone who's not in power anymore and nowhere near the levers of power? Electro gaming, something that has been happening since Thatcher's time. I saw Frank at the NEC. That's from Captain. I was at the Zappa gig. Wait, peace is not possible, says Simon Chandler. It is. It's always possible. It is always possible. We've seen it time and time again in conflicts that seem absolutely entrenched, and there was no way out of this particular thing. Like, we need people sitting down and sorting out a way, a path. Lobbing bombs at each other is never going to work, especially in a situation like this where all you're doing is creating martyrs, creating more terrorists. Every time Israel bombs a hospital in Gaza, they create more terrorists than they kill. And that's the problem. And that's why they can't win this way. I can't see them winning in a militarily. Also, the fact that there's so much international condemnation of what Israel is doing. I mean, it's really in the spotlight. You could argue, if you want, that when the Sri Lankan government, which is Buddhist, decided to take out the Tamil Tigers at the beginning of the 2010s, I mean, they took them out. They went to North Sri Lanka and they literally exterminated entire villages. But no one knows about this. No one talks. Well, people know about it, but no one really talks about it because the international spotlight wasn't particularly on Sri Lanka. But that's why you don't hear about the Tamil Tigers anymore. I mean, Sri Lanka literally wiped them out. I don't think that Israel can do that. The numbers you're dealing with in Gaza is just off the charts. Like, they couldn't get away with it, even though they've killed tens of thousands of people already. I think that's just made 1 million more terrorists. Like, it's not worked, has it? And they haven't got the hostages back. We're seeing protest in Israel, where the Israeli people are protesting, quite rightly, against the government, because they're like, why aren't you getting our hostages back? You know, all you're doing is running around trying these operations to try and rescue people, and you're just finding dead bodies. Can we please sit down, have a conversation, find out what they want, we'll talk about what we want, we'll try and meet in the middle somewhere and get our hostages back. I'm religious and not offended, said Maggie Pie. Oh, thank you very much. Phew. Jim Bob said, the only Indian politicians I know of are the ones that trying to stop runners. One angry pagan says, pagan Romans allowed freedom of religion after they conquered a country. Christian Romans demanded obedience to their one God. Big difference culturally. Well, it's funny you say that, one angry pagan. One of the reasons why the British Empire was slightly more successful, if you want to look at it in terms of just military power, naval power, economically speaking, why it was more successful than other empires like the French Empire, the Spanish Empire, is that the Spanish Empire, they wanted to convert everyone to Catholicism. The French Empire, they wanted to convert everyone to Catholicism. So the French would go into India and they would demand that everyone converted to Catholicism. The Portuguese would do the same. Whereas the British, I mean, you know, don't get me wrong, there were British missionaries, there certainly were, but they would work with the locals through their, you know, allowing them to keep their own religion. I think someone realized at some point that, you know, this is quite an important thing to people. You know, it's quite central to a lot of people's lives, and you don't take that away from them and not suffer the consequences, especially if you're going into someone else's country and trying to colonize it, which is what the British did. Well, we colonized it later. When we first turned up, it was just for, we say trade, it was really to deal drugs, but, you know, that was what we did. Rotten Mouse says, I'm not sure peace is compatible with the idea of religious ethno-state, and colonialism leaves very deep scars. Much would have to change for peace to actually happen. Yes. I agree. I'm just saying it's not impossible. Like, it is possible. Now, when I was traveling in the Middle East, I travelled for a few days with a guy who was a Palestinian, who was he was a Palestinian. He had an Israeli passport. He was ostensibly Muslim. He was brought up Muslim, but he was an atheist. You don't meet that many atheist Palestinians on the road, I gotta say. And he wanted a one-state solution. He pointed to Lebanon. In Lebanon, there was a war in the 1980s between the Christians and the Muslims who lived there. And eventually, it went on for a long time. Hezbollah is a bit of a fallout from that. But the situation they've got now in Beirut, and look, it's not perfect. It's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but they have a rule that the president and the prime minister cannot be both Muslim or both Christian. One of them has to be Christian, one of them has to be Muslim, or vice versa. And that works. I mean, it's not, like I say, it's not perfect. There's a lot of problems going on in Lebanon at the moment, but that kind of idea of everyone living together, then you can have Jewish people living in the Golan Heights or living in Gaza because they just buy a house there. It doesn't feel like an invasion, but like was said, a lot has to change. And oh my God, the optimistic nihilist has just dropped £50 into the super chat fund. Thank you so much, my friend. That is very, very kind of you. John Miyashima is wrong about Ukraine, but correct about Israel. It's a quagmire and it will continue in the decades to come. Positions are too entrenched. Forgiveness is too far gone and no real incentives to end the war to those that profit from it. Very good point there, optimistic nihilist. And thank you so much for the super chat. That's incredibly kind this Wednesday morning. I agree. And I agree that what we can do, okay, and you've got the nail on the head there. No real incentives to end the war to those that profit from it, which is us. Like, we are one of the biggest weapons manufacturers in the world in this country. I mean, whisper it softly. People don't really know this. And here's a fun fact for you. If we sell something to people on the other side of the world, so let's say we sell, I don't know, novelty hats, right? And we sell, 500,000 novelty hats to Australia, to the Australian government, because they need those novelty hats. And the Australian government don't pay. That company has to pursue the Australian government, possibly through the Australian courts or through the British courts, depending on the jurisdiction of the contract that they drew up. But they have to go through the courts to get that money back, right? If rather than selling novelty hats, we had sold them, I don't know, a bunch of weapons, some tanks, some anti-aircraft missiles, and they had asked for, let's say, £6 billion worth of military kit, and they refused to pay. Do you know who pays? Do you want to have a guess? It rhymes with wax weigher. Yeah. Those people who weigh wax. No, the taxpayer. We step in. The government guarantee military exports in this country so that BAE Systems and other weapons manufacturers know they're going to get paid. Even if Jordan orders a bunch of tanks and doesn't actually pay for them all. Because you know what she's like. Anyway, Mike Organ says, there were occasions, especially in India, when missionaries were deported for stirring up trouble. The British attitude was simple. Anything bad for business was avoided, and religion was a hot potato. Exactly. It's why they were arguably more successful and less brutal in some ways. I mean, look, in other ways, God, some of the stories I've heard about the British Empire and what administrators did around the world will give you nightmares forever, like proper nightmares forever. But so it's not like going, oh yeah, but the British Empire was the only good one. No, the British Empire was evil and bad. It was a bad thing that we shouldn't feel proud about. However, when we talk about measures of success, how successful it was more successful than other empires, possibly because they treated religion like a hot potato. Anyway, going back to the military thing, we need an incentive to stop funding Israel, stop supplying them with weapons. We know that the new Labour government has given a list of 35 military things that we're not going to sell to Israel anymore. And that's out of a few hundred. So It is a bit of a drop in the ocean, but still, it sends a message. We don't want our weapons being used for genocide because it's against our law for these weapons to be used for genocide. But what I will say is this. One of the issues that we have with getting people on board for the fact that we should be protesting what Israel's doing and condemning what Israel is doing is the actions of some of the people who are anti-Israeli, right? Now, I am against what the Israeli government is doing right now. I'm against Benjamin Netanyahu. I'm not against Israel per se, and I'm certainly not against Jewish people. And I make that very clear. And when I talk about this, I know it's a sensitive topic. However, there are a lot of people out there who don't make that, aren't really prepared to define it that way and to make that differentiation to say, I'm not talking about Jewish people in general. I'm not talking about Israel in general. I'm talking about what the Israeli government and therefore what the military is doing is absolutely abhorrent. It is wrong. And I'm seeing the same thing that has happened with the absolutely critical green movement at the moment in this country, where it feels like if certain of these actors who are participating in these particular movements were being paid in the anti-Israel group, if they were being paid by Israel, or if, in the case of the Just Stop Oil group, if they were being paid by big oil, it wouldn't be a massive surprise to me. Like, I don't think it is. Like, I'm not going around going, oh yeah, these people who are saying horrible things about Israel, I bet they're paid by Israel to say that. I'm not saying that. I don't think that's the truth. I don't think that Just Stop Oil are working for big oil. But you've got to admit, these people are useful idiots for the Israeli regime and for the big fossil fuel producing bad guys, respectively. Like, they're not making the situation better by their behavior. And I think we've all got to look at this and say, if we are going to raise awareness about the dire consequences the world's going to be well, it is now, but even worse in 5 years' time, in 10 years' time, in 20 years' time, the best way to go about that is by getting as many people as possible on side. And I will give you an example. South Africa. By the end of the 80s, there was not a man, woman, or child in this country. Pretty much. Even Margaret Thatcher. Even Thatcher had to concede that the apartheid regime in South Africa was absolutely abhorrent. Right? That's how far it had gone. And we're not anywhere near that with Israel, and we're not anywhere near that with global warming in that, it's abhorrent, we need to stop this. And I think a lot of the issue here, and look, I'm not victim blaming. I don't want to come across like, it's all the Gazan people's fault. It's not. But when we are protesting against this, when we are raising awareness about this, we need to do it in a way that gets people on side. And you know what? I will take responsibility for, to some extent, for the failure of the anti-Brexit campaign. It was absolutely... It wasn't well organised. Let's put it that way. Look, I can't take responsibility personally for the fact it wasn't well organised. I wasn't one of the people organising it. But if someone had said to me, oh, that particular Brexiteer that anti-Brexiteer, that person fighting to remain in the EU is actually being paid by Vladimir Putin or one of his agents in this country, like Nigel Farage or someone, to make Brexit happen by their behaviour, by messing things up, by gumming up the works, especially when it came to things like meeting and organising things. So we've got to look at that. If we want the situation to change, I think that Optimistic Nihilist made a really good point there, saying there's no real incentives to end the war for those who profit from it. There needs to be incentives for those who profit from it. So here's an idea for you. First of all, we people, right? We can get more people on side if we say, if we say, look at this injustice, it's not fair. It's nothing to do with the people's religions on either side. It's just this bunch of people are killing this bunch of people, and this bunch of people are holding their people hostage, and nothing's going to be solved until we actually push for peace. And that's what these demonstrations should be about. They should be about peace. And a lot of people who go on those demonstrations, it's exactly what they want. It's exactly what they want. But when how can I put this? Like, if you turn up to a football match wearing like dressed up as a full kit wanker, right? And then you say that you want to draw, no one's going to believe you. Okay? No one is going to believe someone who's dressed from head to toe in Manchester United gear and then say, well, what result do you want? Oh, I want to draw. They're going to know you're not. Don't even know. You're not. You don't want to draw at all. You want your team to win. You want Manchester United to win, don't you? You bastard. So if we're turning up for a protest to say that we want peace in the Middle East, I don't know if having loads of it, like Palestinian flags, is the way to do it. And look at it the other way. If there was a march by mostly Jewish people who wanted peace in the Middle East, and they were all waving Israeli flags, how would that look to the other side? Would it look like they were impartial? Would it look like they don't want Israel to win this conflict that can't be won? No. So I think that we need new messages, new symbols, new ways of saying, I don't want Israel to win. I don't want the Palestinians to win. I want peace to win. That's who has to win in this situation. When that happens, we can start moving forward. Thank you so much to Optimistic Nihilist for the extra tenner. Cheers, mate. That's really kind of you this morning. I'm really, that's lovely. Under the current system, taxpayer money, and indeed all money, exists to serve the interests of the dominator class, the capitalist elite. The dominator class who actually work do not get a real say. Optimistic Nihilist, I agree to a certain extent with that, and obviously thanks for the money. But I'm more concerned about, I am concerned, as you are, for working class people getting their say. We are allowed to, there was a famous quote by Jean-Jacques Rousseau many moons ago where he said the British people think they're free. They're not. They're only free once every 5 years when they have an election. After that, they're back in chains. And he's right, because a lot of people do not have any power between elections. They just don't. So we would benefit massively from opening up, and this is why DEI is so important, right? Because diversity and inclusion doesn't just necessarily include different people from different racial backgrounds and people from different religions and people with disabilities. It also can mean class as well. So allowing more people from working class backgrounds to come and be part of society in a way that they're kind of locked out at the moment. And this is one of the reasons why, if you go to privateschoolmafia.com, literally everyone you see on the TV, it's pretty much probably going to have gone to private school. Pretty much everyone. That shuts out 93% of the population from those top jobs, from having their own TV series or TV show or making a film. Why do you think so many British films are about posh people? Name a British film. Notting Hill, it's about posh people. Four Weddings and a Funeral, it's about posh people going to weddings. Like, it was written by Richard Curtis, and he went to private school. Of course he did. And like, the director probably went to private school as well, and Hugh Grant definitely went to private school. Like, everyone in it, like, or we make stuff about the upper class in the Victorian era, or the Edwardian era, or whatever, the Georgian era. We make these, like, we want to know what's happening in Downton Abbey. We want to know what's happening in Bridgerton. It's what's all the rich people doing, and we don't get the stories about working class heroes. We don't, because there's no working class people making those stories. And when we do have a working class person on TV, someone's playing a working class person on TV. Unless it's a soap opera, generally it's a posh person pretending to be poor, which kind of annoys me. What do they call that? Pleb face? Oh. But yeah, I think a big step towards enfranchising people from the working class comes from allowing them these opportunities to tell their stories, which we don't allow at the moment, unless it's through the lens of a reality TV show, which is generally exploitative. But that's a story for another day. That's a conversation for another day. So how's about we see that starting Russian report? Yeah, that would be good. Said I'm just saying that to Howard Risby. EFI Neil, I remember years ago criticising the Israeli government. I was immediately called anti-Semitic. How can we have a dialogue before a problem gets out of hand when it gets shut down by calls of racism? Well, this is what I don't get, right? I've been to Israel. I've got friends who are Israeli. I've got friends who are Palestinian. That doesn't give me any magic powers, by the way. I'm just saying, I'm not, I have friends who are black, and then he says something completely horribly racist. No, my point by that is, like, I don't offend them when I say that their government or, or Hamas or Hezbollah or Fatah are doing things wrong. Like, if I'm criticizing them, it's fine. If I'm criticizing Macron or Orban or Donald Trump even, I don't think all Americans are offended. Like, oh, how dare you? You're anti-American, you are, because you don't like Trump. You don't like what Trump's doing. Even if I criticize American foreign policy, which I do a lot, it's not taken as like, oh, well, you're slagging off all Americans. But I don't get that for Israel either. I mean, someone in the chat might have called me anti-Semitic for what I've said this morning. I haven't seen it. If they did, maybe if you want to give me a super chat and call me anti-Semitic, then that'll I'll notice that more. But yeah, I mean, there's a way of doing it. That's all I want to say about that. There's a way of doing it, approaching this conversation, and wearing a Palestinian flag while explaining how you want peace in the Middle East. Like I say, it's like turning up at a football match, full kit wanker, and saying that you want a score draw. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's not real. It's not realistic. It's people aren't going to take you seriously. Even if you do really want a score draw. I mean, maybe you've got the pools going, something, if you remember them. Gary DeSantis, thank you very much for the super chat, mate. They hate you if you're clever, and they despise a fool. That's from Working Class Hero by John Lennon, which is a great song. And very true. I like to sing Working Class Tory, because working class Tories blow my mind. Like, how can you vote for the people who are just making your life worse and worse? Sean says, you should have watched Married at First Sight. There was a posh wedding and a working class wedding. They're cackling from the posh wedding, and one said, married someone like us, lol. Mike Organ, we are our own worst enemy. My father used to say, freedom is not won, it is forced on people by the enlightened, and normally it's resisted. You might be. I think your dad's onto something there. Ken Loach does make those films, but obviously accused of anti-Semitism. Well, Ken Loach isn't working class. I mean, he came from quite a posh family, but I mean, the reason why he's been called anti-Semitic in recent years is that he has made some statements that are a little bit can be perceived as being anti-Semitic. Just don't make those statements. It's as simple as that. It's like when people get caught in a hot mic saying the N-word, and I'm just like, what? Do you use that in everyday life? Like, what is wrong with you? Unless I watch a Quentin Tarantino film, I can go for days, weeks, months without hearing that word. And I know, like, I didn't mean it like being said in anger at me. Obviously, that's not going to happen. But, like, I mean, like, just hearing it in general. Who do these people hang out with that they use that word in just everyday conversation? Because they're not the people I've ever hung out with. What can I say? I hear people moaning about... all I hear people moaning about is winter fuel payment, like parrots. Ozzy Osbourne's version is better, Working Class Hero. And Howard says, inquiry, why is any criticism of Zionists who don't represent all Israelis, let alone one Jew, automatically anti-Semitic when Arabs are Semitic people who speak a Semitic language? Well, you're being semantic there. Maybe not Semitic, but semantic. Yes, the original term, the anti-Semitic meant the Semitic people, which is the people of like, the Holy Land and around the Levant. But that's not what it means anymore. Like, it just means Jewish. Like, now that's what it means. And I never use the word Zionist to describe the situation over there, because I find it really unhelpful, because it means different things to different people. And so just don't use it. Just don't use that term, because it can be it's generally seen as someone who doesn't think Israel has a right to exist. I'm not going to call it the Israeli government. I'm not going to even call it the IDF. I'm going to call it the Zionists. It's the Zionists, and then you tap into that whole, the principles of the Elders of Zion, one of the oldest conspiracy bullshit fake flag operations in history. Well, that we know of. I'm sure there was some during the I'm sure there was some during the Roman days. Welcome to Level 1, Tim. Thanks very much. This is a big discussion. This could probably go on all morning, but I'm going to have to leave it at that. Now, I'm going to try very hard to do PMQs at 12 o'clock today. However, we've got the well, not builders, but we've got people in later today, and I'm the only one in the house. So there's a very good chance they're going to turn up halfway through PMQs. So what I'm going to do is, if I can get the show started, I will start it, and I might have to leave halfway through, but I'll just disappear myself and turn my mic off, and I'll go and deal with the workmen, and you can still leave your comments in the chat. So if you want to join us for that at 12 o'clock, you're very, very welcome to do so. And at 6 o'clock today, the wonderful Rachel Harris will be returning for an episode of The Intersection. And that'll be really cool. Oh, talking of cool, we have another super chat. Thank you very much to One Angry Pagan. Unfortunately, conflict is a natural catalyst for evolution in all species, one way or another. It's just that ours is the most destructive about it. I've got to dispute that a little bit. Like, okay, conflict, yeah, but it's usually a conflict and arms war between giraffes and the trees that they eat. The trees get a little bit higher, so the giraffes' necks get a bit longer throughout the generations. But I mean, and then you obviously got natural selection, but it's generally not species killing their own. That's not what normally happens. I mean, I know it happens in some. I'm sure there's some parasitic wasps out there that absolutely kill their own, and I know that chimpanzees do. Bonobos don't, but bonobos just have sex all the time. If they want to solve a conflict, that's what they do. They just like having sex. Whereas chimpanzees, or the closest relative, just like to go to war. And then we've got what am I doing here? But yeah, and the other thing is sexual selection as well, which explains the peacock's tail and also the mad size of human brains, which are about 4 times as big as chimpanzees, which is crazy when you think about it. I was telling you tonight, we've got Rachel Harris is going to be interviewing Patrick McGann, who was around during Section 28 and the fight against HIV/AIDS. And he'll be talking about the original fight back in the 1980s. When it was against the gay community. Like, if you were usually a gay man, I mean, they kind of ignored lesbians, the homophobes at the time. It was just gay men. They were the problem. And then you had also this horrific virus that was going around, HIV, and the government's shitty response to that. Section 28, which is when in the 1980s schools would ban teachers from talking about homosexual relationships in case they gayed the kids or something, which wasn't repealed until I think the early 2000s by the Labour government. But I think it was the second term of the Labour government where they actually got rid of it. And now we're seeing that obviously all play out again. The same beats, the same lines, the same attack lines, the same slurs, the same bigotry against trans people. So yeah, well, join us for that as we go through our second. I mean, I say second iteration of this, but it's probably way more than that, because I think that every generation has to have its scapegoats on which all problems, all the ills of mankind are foisted upon. Humankind, I should say, are foisted upon this small minority, and maybe a minority of a minority. It's all their fault. I mean, it's not great. Anyway, but please join us for that. It will be an entertaining and enlightening chat, I am sure. And then finally, obviously, we've got my talk that I'm doing. Not just me, but also Peter Core of the National Rejoin March, which is taking place a week on Saturday in London. He's going to be there. Also, Femi Olawale, our good friend to this channel, and also Mike Galsworthy, another good friend of this channel, who is the head of the European movement at the moment. We're going to be talking about, do all roads lead back to Europe? There's about 20 odd tickets left. It's not a very big venue. So please, if you want tickets for it, please try and get them before the day. Also, because the venue people want numbers, and I'm like, well, we sold this many tickets, and this is what happened last year. I said, well, we sold X many tickets, and like double that number turned up, because you could just turn up on the day. If you can get a ticket, please do. The tickets are free. So please, if you're going to be in Liverpool on Monday at 8:30, I've just put the link in the chat. The link is also in the description below. So please tick that. Oh, Lee Corn's got his ticket. Well done, Lee Corn. Thank you. Lee Corn's going to be helping out as well. So cheers. I hope you didn't pay for it. I may have to watch the stream again because I fell back to sleep, says Duke Vengeance. That's absolutely fine. My road leads to the high street. Mm. Yeah, but eventually it leads back to Rome. Evolution is humans getting to a civilized enough state to not use conflict as a resolution and not need the premise of survival of the fittest. Yeah, the survival of the fittest is always it's a misquote. Like Darwin never said that. He never said survival of the fittest. He never used that expression. It was more to do with the best in any cohort, in any group, in any generation. The most adapted to their environments will thrive, especially when times are hard, when the climate changes, and there'll be certain attributes. Maybe some group of birds, and some of them have slightly longer beaks, and that allows them to get to the seeds that the others can't get to. And then within a generation, all those birds have slightly longer beaks, because the ones who didn't have the longer beaks have died off, you see. Nick says, Euromove are too timid in their ambitions. They need to focus on EEA, SM, instead of itty-bitty mini deals. Nick, come to the chat, mate. Nick's got big opinions on this, and I don't think he's wrong, but yeah. Sean says, shit, I'm struggling to find a hotel in Liverpool at 180 quid for a night for a hotel. Try just staying out of town. If you stay out in the sticks, you can get... There was somewhere I saw yesterday for like 31 quid for a night. I mean, it's probably not very nice and share bathroom, but it's only a couple of quid for the bus in. So yeah, if you want to do that, I'm going to be staying out in West Derby. Thanks, Graham. Bye all, says Jane. And that's my cue to go. So yeah, I'll be back at 12, hopefully, if I'm not dealing with builders. And we'll definitely be back at 6 o'clock today for the intersection. And until then, I'll say thank you so much for watching. Uncle Phil will be back tomorrow for Morning Brew. And until then, I'll say give us a like on the way out, as always. And until next time, hello, good evening, welcome, and goodbye.